Welcome to today's deep dive. I am incredibly eager to get into this one with you
Oh, me too. This is a big one.
because we are unpacking an absolute titan of literature and the stage.
Yeah.
We are looking at the character of Cyrano de Bergerac. Now, you already know the icon.
Where it's a swashbuckling poet.
Yeah, the impossibly fast-talking Gascon with the rapier wit and the tragic love life.
Of course.
But today our mission is to completely bypass that myth and look at the raw material that created him. So we are drawing from Edmond Rostand's classic 1897 heroic comedy, of course.
As we have to.
But we are pairing it with a brilliant prequel text called Before the Panache, from Savignon to Cyrano de Bergerac.
And I mean, that prequel is the key to this entire discussion.
It really is.
We so often look at Cyrano's legendary panache as his inherent trait, as if he simply stepped out of the womb with a sword in one hand and a rhyming couplet in the other.
Just fully formed.
Right. But this deep dive is going to reveal how that iconic bravado is actually a meticulously constructed armor. By exploring his origins and the rather severe family dynamics he navigated, we get a profound psychological study.
It's fascinating.
It shows how trauma and rejection and profound loss literally forged the hero you think you know.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the very beginning. The forge at his family's rural estate, Mauvière.
Right before the sweeping cape and the jewels.
Exactly. Before all of that, he was just Savignon. And the conflict he faces at home isn't against enemy swordsmen. It is an ideological war with his own father, Abel.
Yes.
How'd, as a young man with a mind geared entirely toward poetry and philosophy, survive in an environment that only values what you can pull out of the dirt?
It is a brutal environment for an artist. I mean, Abel is a man defined entirely by agrarian practicality.
Right.
For him, the world is measured in crop yields and ledgers and surviving the harsh winters. He views his son's obsession with literature not just as a frivolous waste of time.
But as a threat.
Exactly. An active threat to the family's survival. There is a deeply telling moment where Abel tells Savignon that white bread is baked in ovens, fool, not in the soul.
Wow.
Yeah, that sets the baseline for Savignon's early life. His very nature is considered useless by the man whose approval he ostensibly needs.
But he doesn't immediately rebel, which is what you might expect from a fiery young poet.
No, he doesn't.
He actually tries to bridge that impossible gap between backbreaking farm labor and the high-flying world of verse. There's that striking scene where he makes a pact with his brother Pierre.
Oh, the flour sacks.
Yeah, he physically steps up to haul these massive, heavy sacks of flour alongside him.
Because he wants to prove that his art isn't born of laziness. He tells his brother that a verse actually stands straighter when the spine has learned to bow.
It is a beautiful concept.
It really is. He is actively seeking what he calls a double fire.
A double fire.
Yeah, he wants to maintain one fire to warm the house and keep his family alive, and a second, separate fire to feed his own soul.
He is trying to be the dutiful son and the transcendent poet simultaneously.
Right.
Which brings us to the inciting incident of his entire psychological development. The defining trauma centers entirely around this concept of the fire.
Yeah, this is rough.
The family is freezing, the hearth is dying out, and his father, acting purely out of a desperate, pragmatic need for kindling, just grabs a bundle of papers to reignite the flames.
And it happens to be Savignon's manuscripts.
His life's work.
What's fascinating here is Savignon's reaction. The destruction of his work is absolute. Pages just curl up and vanish.
Gone.
But he doesn't fly into the violent theatrical rage the older Cyrano is famous for. He goes icy pale. He internalizes it instantly.
Yeah.
He recognizes that the domestic fire, the very thing required to keep the family roof over his head, has consumed his vulnerability.
He watches his words turn to smoke and says, "Ash is a school where the heart learns vigilance."
That is the moment the forge truly begins. That is when the armor is cast. He realizes that his soul cannot exist out in the open, unshielded, because the world's practical demands will simply burn it for warmth.
So art requires a fortress.
Exactly.
He does get one fleeting moment of validation before he is sent away to Paris, though. His mother, Espérance, gives him a beautifully trimmed goose quill.
It feels like a silent rebellion against the father's pragmatism.
It does. She is giving him an instrument of flight, telling him to let his words travel beyond the muddy borders of Mauvière.
She provides the fragile hope he carries into the capital. But when he arrives in Paris to attend the strict college of Beauvais, he is carrying a dangerous mix of raw, uncompromising rural pride and the heavy baggage of his family name.
Right.
He expects to command respect through sheer force of will.
And Paris completely chews him up. He immediately clashes with the rigid academic hierarchy, specifically Rector Grandier.
Yeah.
But the real collision happens with a fellow student, Claude Montfleury. Now, you already know the famous mockery Cyrano endures later in life. But here at Beauvais, we see the genesis of it.
The origin story of the insult.
Right. Montfleury publicly targets Savigny's nose, describing it as a prow that arrives 3 steps before he does.
Montfleury spots the provincial insecurity immediately and strikes at the most obvious physical target. And because Savigny hasn't yet built the psychological armor of Cyrano, the insult hits flesh.
It cuts deep.
He is utterly dismantled by the humiliation. In his ensuing frustration, he acts out, violently gets expelled, and even snaps that delicate goose quill his mother gave him.
He breaks the symbol of his mother's hope. So he has failed his father's practical expectations, and now he has failed the intellectual expectations of Paris. His birth name is dragging through the mud. He is at rock bottom.
The thematic weight of this failure cannot be overstated. Savigny learns the hard way that his blunt rural pride is useless in Paris. The city devours people who try to shine without a fortified foundation.
Yeah.
He needs a completely new paradigm to survive.
Which brings him into the orbit of Paul Scarron in the Parisian taverns. Scarron is a libertine poet operating entirely outside the rigid academic world Savigny just failed out of.
A total outcast himself.
Right. And Scarron delivers a harsh reality check. You cannot carry the failures of Molière's anymore.
Scarron presents him with an engraving of Hercules slaying the Hydra. He frames Hercules not as a divine hero, but as an outcast and a bastard who was cursed by the gods.
Hercules didn't ask for fairness.
No, he forged his own fate with a club. Scarron is telling Savigny that survival in this city requires claiming a new identity, a writer's name that functions as a shield.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Savigny synthesizes everything. He takes the brute labor of Hercules, his own humanity as Savigny, and the noble echo of his rural roots, and he declares himself Hercules Savigny de Cyrano de Bergerac.
It is a masterclass in psychological reinvention.
True.
He is taking absolute ownership of his narrative. Furthermore, he makes a brilliant tactical decision regarding the very thing that destroyed him at Beauvais. He decides his massive nose will no longer be a source of shame.
He weaponizes it.
Exactly.
He turns the defect into the summit. He declares it will be his standard raised on high Cape Cliff rampart. Because if you lean into the mockery and make the joke sharper and louder than your bullies ever, could you instantly strip them of their ammunition?
But we must remember the warning presented in the prequels forward. This new identity is a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
He is hammering this panache into shape, specifically so he doesn't have to feel the sting of rejection anymore.
Right.
The cape and the cliff are designed to keep people out.
And we see exactly how that plays out when he steps onto the Parisian trestles and meets Marion Delorme. She is a brilliant, highly influential courtesan in the literary salons.
And she sees right through him.
She watches this new Cyrano declaiming his fierce verses, but she doesn't just applaud the performance, she challenges the man underneath it.
Marion demands authenticity in a society completely obsessed with artifice. She asks him point blank if he actually lives the grand ideals he shouts from the stage like honor, right, truth.
Or if he's just another fine-tongued man hiding behind a performance.
Right. She gives him a silver quill to replace the broken goose feather, instructing him to let his writing bite when needed.
She becomes his first great muse, and inevitably his first unrequited love.
Yeah.
But she spots the danger in his intensity. She warns him that love is a secret garden. You have to tend slowly, not a forest you can just crash through with a sword.
Cyrano, however, is fueled by that internal fire we discussed earlier. He lacks the patience for his secret garden. He makes the fateful decision to serenade her under her balcony at night.
This scene is agonizing to read. He stands in the dark, pouring out a completely raw, passionate confession of love.
And it is shattered.
By Paul Scarron, who is up on the balcony with Marion. Scarron is drunk, and he loudly, ruthlessly mocks Cyrano's poetry. He humiliates him, telling him love doesn't care about moonlight rhymes.
Then Marion delivers the final blow, albeit gently. She firmly rejects him, telling him he must not confuse ink and blood.
So painful.
The reality of love is not the same as the poetry written about it.
He dreamed far above his station, and the fall is devastating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to the 1897 play, you are already so familiar with his agonizing rejection under Marion's balcony.
Recontextualizes everything.
It really does.
We all know the iconic scene where the older Cyrano hides in the shadows of Roxane's balcony, feeding the handsome Christian the words of love.
Yeah.
The prequel reveals why he stays in the shadows. It isn't just a noble sacrifice for a friend. It is a deeply ingrained trauma response.
He learned that exposing his true heart in the light only invites mockery.
Exactly. He learned at Marian's balcony that one may dream aloft and tumble just as fast. He decides then and there that he will never again risk his own heart without a proxy.
So to escape the unbearable pain of the salons and this romantic rejection, he leans entirely into the physical side of his armor. He runs to the military.
He joins the boisterous, rough brotherhood of the cadets of Gascony under Captain Carbon de Casteljaloux.
And naturally, the moment he arrives, the cadets test him by mocking his nose.
But this time there is no broken quill. There is no weeping. An arrogant officer who happens to be connected to the powerful Cardinal Richelieu insults the cadets.
And Cyrano steps up.
Throws his love in the man's face and disarms him with absolute theatrical perfection. He composes poetry while he parries and strikes. It instantly secures the undying respect of the entire company.
This leads to a fascinating dynamic with his close friend, Lebret. To protect Cyrano, Lebret starts a rumor that Cyrano has killed 7 men simply for mentioning his nose.
7 men.
It creates a terrifying, untouchable aura around him.
But isn't there something incredibly toxic about that? He's actively leaning into a reputation as a violent murderer just to ensure no one ever pokes at his physical insecurities again.
He absolutely is.
He's using the threat of death as a shield for his ego.
That is the paradox of his character. He accepts the monstrous rumor because it serves the armor. But the crucible of war reveals a much deeper psychological truth.
During his first battle, right?
Yeah, during a chaotic, brutal night ambush, Cyrano saves Lebret and fights with a terrifying frenzy. When the smoke clears, Lebret asks him why he was smiling in the middle of such absolute hell.
And Cyrano admits that in the middle of all that chaos and death, he finally feels alive and whole.
It's a striking admission.
He tells Lebret that back in the salons of Paris, his identity was diluted, scattered in words and performances. But with a sword in his hand facing death, he is unified.
This raises an important question about the utility of violence for a poetic soul. Combat becomes a profound psychological release. The frenzy of battle serves as a temporary amnesia for his internal wounds.
War is the ultimate distraction.
Yes, from the pain of Marian's rejection and his father's disapproval. His violent contradictions only find harmony when his life is actively on the line.
And we see him masterfully wield this understanding of the human soul later on. Jumping into Rostand's original text, look at the mature Cyrano during the siege of Arras. The cadets are surrounded by the Spanish.
Yeah, they're starving.
They are complaining about the physical agony of hunger. But Cyrano doesn't offer them food. He has the 5-player play a traditional tune of the Dordogne, their homeland.
He deliberately breaks their hearts to save their minds.
Wow.
By playing that tune, he shifts their suffering from the immediate degrading physical pain of their empty stomachs to a noble moral pain. Homesickness.
That's brilliant.
He proves that his ultimate mastery isn't just with a sword. It is his ability to control and elevate the emotional state of the men around him through pure art.
So what does this all mean for the masterpiece we thought we knew? When you layer the psychological context of the prequel of a Rostand's play, every single famous scene takes on a completely different weight.
Completely different.
Take the legendary opening duel at the Hôtel de Bourgogne.
In the play, Cyrano disrupts the theatrical performance, publicly humiliates the lead actor Montfleury, and chases him off the stage.
Right.
He then fights a duel with the Vicomte de Valvert, composing a perfect ballade while they clash swords, ending with the famous strike. À la fin de l'envoi, je touche.
At the end of the refrain, I strike.
Yeah.
It's brilliant bravado. But with the prequel in mind, we know the actor he chases off the stage is the uncle of Claude Montfleury.
The exact same boy who mercilessly mocked his nose.
And stole his pride back at the College of Beauvais. This isn't just a random display of artistic temperament. This is years of pent-up generational vengeance finally finding an outlet.
The subtext changes entirely.
Yeah.
The same is true for the central tragedy of the play, The Balcony and the Secret.
Yeah.
Cyrano is deeply, profoundly in love with his cousin Roxane. The prequel informs us that Roxane actually shed her childhood name Madeleine to better fit into the sophisticated Parisian salons.
Right.
But Roxane is infatuated with Christian Solomon, a newly arrived cadet who possesses the physical beauty Cyrano lacks, but who is entirely incapable of poetic speech.
So Cyrano makes the famous deal. He becomes Christian's voice, he writes the letters, he stands in the shadows and seduces the woman he loves, but he does it while wearing Christian's face as a mask.
The prequel synthesizes this dynamic, perfectly stating, Christian is not merely a friend, He becomes the alibi of a heart that forbids itself to love.
An alibi. That's powerful.
Because of the trauma at Mauvière and the devastating rejection by Marion under that first balcony, Cyrano's panache has become an impenetrable prison.
Yeah.
He uses Christian to preemptively stop himself from feeling the inevitable pain of his own perceived ugliness. He willingly gives away his own love story because remaining in the shadows is the only place he feels safe.
It is the ultimate tragedy of self-sabotage, and it all culminates in that poignant final act. 14 years have passed. Cyrano is walking through the streets of Paris, and he is mortally wounded.
But he isn't struck down in a glorious duel.
No, he doesn't fall on a battlefield. He is ambushed by a nameless lackey who drops a heavy piece of firewood on his head from an upper window. It is entirely unheroic. It is cowardly and mundane.
Yet he hides the mortal head wound and makes his weekly visit to Roxane, who has retreated to a convent to mourn Christian for the last 14 years.
As the sun sets and the light fades, he asks to read Christian's final letter.
And as he recites it aloud, in the dark, flawlessly speaking, the words he wrote so long ago, Roxane finally hears the truth. She recognizes the soul she has loved all these years.
She realizes it was always him. She tells him, "I have ruined your life." But Cyrano, ever the protector, refuses to let her carry that guilt.
Right.
He tells her that she brought a feminine sweetness into his life that his own mother ultimately couldn't sustain for him. But as death approaches, his mind slips into delirium. He refuses to die sitting down.
He struggles to his feet and draws his sword one last time. He spends his final moments fighting his invisible lifelong enemies in the empty air.
He names them as he strikes.
Falsehood, compromise, prejudice, and cowardice. He is battling the very societal diseases he built his entire identity, his panache, to oppose.
And as he finally collapses, he declares that there is one thing he will take with him to heaven entirely unstained and uncreased: his panache, the white plume.
It remains his ultimate symbol of uncompromising pride. But if we distill all of this and connect it directly to you, the listener, we have to ask, why does a 17th century poet swordsman matter today?
Good question.
Because Cyrano perfectly embodies the universal human instinct to protect our deepest vulnerabilities. He demonstrates that the defense mechanisms we develop to survive the world, whether that is razor-sharp humor, formidable intellect, or loud bravado, can evolve into our greatest masterpieces.
Yeah.
But if left unchecked, they are the exact same mechanisms that will isolate us from true intimacy.
That is the beautiful, terrible arc of this deep dive. We tracked the agrarian farm boy Savignon, whose precious manuscripts were burned for simple household warmth as he marched into Paris and forged a magnificent, unyielding armor of wit, steel, and poetry.
He defended his heart so successfully from the cruelty of the world that he accidentally defended himself from the love he desperately wanted.
Which leaves us with a necessary thought to mull over, extending beyond 17th century France and right into our current reality. We've talked extensively about how Cyrano's panache was a magnificent prison, but look at the modern world.
Right. Look at the highly curated digital personas, the avatars, and the social media profiles we all maintain today. Aren't those our modern panache?
They really are.
We carefully craft these witty, untouchable, perfectly aesthetic versions of ourselves to interact with the public, shielding our messy, vulnerable realities from view.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, has modern society forced every single one of us to become Cyrano? And if we are all busy interacting through our magnificent digital armor, who is left to actually step out of the shadows and stand under the balcony?